This is the Gateshead International Stadium, home to National League club Gateshead FC. Hello, my name is Richard and this is Grassroots Football Journeys, where we look at the history and former home grounds of another local football club. In this episode we look at a club with an unusual history who are still living in the shadow of their rather more illustrious neighbours from the other side of the River Tyne. This is the story of Gateshead FC. The history of Gateshead FC actually began 10 miles away up the coast at South Shields. The route between the two towns along John Reed Road will be familiar to anyone who has ever completed the Great North Run. The original South Shields FC had been formed in 1899 and played a majority of their existence here at what was then called Horsley Hill. The ground was built in the late 1800s and was originally used for rugby until South Shields Adelaide moved here in 1908. The club changed its name to South Shields FC in 1910 and was promoted to the Football League's second division in 1919. The ground staged its first ever league match in September of that year when 18,000 fans saw a 2-0 victory over Fulham. The record attendance at the ground came in 1927 when 24,348 saw an FA Cup tie against Swansea Town. But the glory days were short-lived. In 1928 the club was relegated to the newly formed Division 3 North, and with dwindling attendances the club left their home in South Shields to relocate to Gateshead in 1930. The last Football League match at Horsley Hall was a 2-2 draw against Accrington Stanley in May 1930, watched by just 1,752 fans. The stadium was taken over by a new South Shields club in 1936 and they remained here until 1950 before moving to Simonside Hall, which we'll look at in more detail when we cover South Shields FC in a future episode. As well as football, greyhound racing was also staged at Horsley Hill from 1933 until it ceased in 1966, including the staging of the Durham Cup and the South Shields Cup. After the new South Shields club left in 1950, the ground was left derelict for a number of years before being redeveloped into this housing estate in the 1980s, and nothing now remains to suggest league football was ever played here. After the move away from South Shields, football finally arrived in Gateshead and the club were renamed Gateshead AFC, playing here at Redhew Park. Built from a worked out clay pit known as Johnson's Clay Hole, the ground opened in August 1930 and staged its first Football League match in Division 3 North later that month against Doncaster Rovers, watched by 15,554 spectators. Like Horsley Hill, the ground also staged greyhound racing from 1937 until 1966. The club lost its Football League status in 1960, being replaced by Peterborough United, and when greyhound racing was stopped altogether in 1966, it put the very future of the ground and the club in serious doubt. In 1967, Gateshead AFC tried unsuccessfully to stage a speedway in this stadium as an alternative source of income, but a fire during the 1971-72 season forced the club out of Redhew Park completely and they moved to Gateshead Youth Stadium. With finances in a mess and very little support, the club were liquidated in August 1973. The ground at Redhew Park, already derelict from years of neglect, was demolished completely in 1972, but local football has been restored to the site in recent years as this Power League five-a-side venue. Following the demise of Gateshead AFC and its brief replacement Gateshead United, the current Gateshead FC were established in 1977 and played here at what was then called the Gateshead Youth Stadium. Built in 1955 on the site of a former chemical works, the stadium was opened by Jim Peters in August of that year. At the time it only contained a cinder running track and asphalt cycling track, but a stand and floodlights were fitted soon after. Supported by local runner Brendan Foster, many improvements followed, such as a new track and 4 new stands. The first Gateshead games were staged here in 1974 and in 1981 it was renamed the Gateshead International Stadium. The growth continued sharply and in 1989 it hosted the Europa Cup of Athletics for the first time. In 2006, 2 new artificial football pitches were installed along with new indoor athletics training facilities. In 2009, the club revealed plans to move here to Prince Consort Road to take over the derelict former home of North Durham Rugby and Cricket Club. However, the move failed to materialise and Gateshead FC instead remained at the International Stadium. Gateshead FC began life taking over the Northern Premier League fixtures from Gateshead United. They were promoted in 1983 to the Alliance League, now known as the Conference, the top tier of non-league football. The club suffered a bit of a yo-yo existence for the rest of the decade, suffering relegation in 1985, promotion in 1986 and relegation again in 1987. After promotion in 1990, the club stayed in the Alliance League for several years until relegation again in 1998. In 2008, the club returned to the Alliance League, now renamed Conference North, after winning the Northern Premier League Premier Division playoffs, and a year later they were promoted again to the Conference National League, just one division below the Football League. In 2014 they reached the Conference National Playoff Final. The semi-final against Grimsby Town saw a record attendance at the stadium of 8,144, but Gateshead lost to Cambridge United at Wembley, the nearest they've come to league football since 1960. In 2019 the club was suspended from the National League due to financial irregularities, but they returned at the end of the 2021-2022 season to take their place once again in the top flight of non-league football. So this has been the story of Gateshead FC, an historic club looking to get back in the big time. My name is Richard and this has been Grassroots Football Journeys, where we've looked at the history and home grounds of another local football club. If you have enjoyed this episode, why not give it a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel. Not only do we produce these great little football documentaries, we also show some rare and unique drone footage. We'll be back next time for another exciting episode of Grassroots Football Journeys, where we'll look at the home grounds and history of another local football club. Join us for that, coming very, very soon.